Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DI 101 webinar series. My name is Jared Evans, and I am the Director of Marketing for Distribution International. If you are new to the DI 101 webinar series, I will tell you that it is an incredible resource offered to DI customers, partners, and associates. By partnering with our manufacturers and our industry experts, these webinars deliver informative presentations about industry trends, new technology, new products, and product applications. In order to fully support our customers, Distribution International offers products and solutions from multiple manufacturers and brands in many different product categories. This webinar does not represent an endorsement of one manufacturer or brand over another. We do pride ourselves in partnering with manufacturers that deliver products of the highest quality to our customers. We are extremely excited to welcome our strategic manufacturing partner, 3M, for today's webinar presentation. Today's course details 3M fire barrier portfolio and proper applications. We welcome our presenter from 3M. He's the National Sales Manager of Specified Construction Projects, Jason Wharton. He brings more than 25 years of firestop experience with a strong background in general contracting and specialty product distribution. He has held various leadership roles within 3M's fire protection business. Jason has served as an invaluable resource on many of the largest and most complex high-profile projects across the United States. We're proud to have 3M present today, and we thank them for their time. We will field questions. We will field them at the end of the webinar. To submit questions, please use the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. You can submit your questions at any point during the webinar, and we will answer the questions at the end. So without further delay, I will turn this over to Jason Wharton with 3M.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate you inviting us here today, and looking forward to to an open conversation. At least at the end, we'll definitely take some Q&A. And welcome, to all your partners and attendees. So thank you. So basically today, what we're going to do is this, obviously we have a short period of time, so we're just going to do a very wide, broad brush, overview on fire stopping, fire protection. So essentially firestop 101, let's call it. So we'll get into, some of the requirements, systems, and solutions. So getting into the basics, just to get right to it, what exactly is fire stopping, right? A lot of us just think, it's something the inspector's pushing on us. It's more than that. It's a life safety subject. It's a code requirement. But the main objective is, and just to simplify it, is to provide containment or compartmentalization. So if you look, just at these simple details that we have here, essentially what we're trying to do is contain the fire, slow down the spread, right? If it's a rated unit that you're in, a room that you're in, and it's it's hourly rated for 1 hour, we want to contain the fire within that unit or within that floor for that time frame. So your typical hourly F rating, depending on the design of your building, is anywhere between 1 and 4 hour protection. So containment or compartmentalization, that's essentially what we're trying to provide. So very similar to the sprinkler industry, right? Most of the commercial buildings that you're in, even residential, may have sprinklers. Those are designed once a fire breaks out, right? They go off and they themselves slow down the spread. So this is all part of providing and maintaining the hourly resistance as designed within the building. So again, very simple details here, but just to give you an idea, generally when you think fire protection, fire stopping, you're thinking through penetrations. We're going to get into construction joints and insulative wraps as well. But essentially, the walls, the floors, depending on the design, they are rated substrates. Okay, so once you penetrate that rated substrate and put an opening into that substrate, whether it be a wall or floor. Now we've derated it, so we want to restore the integrity of it, right? We want to stop the passage of smoke, which is the #1 cause of death in a fire scenario, is smoke inhalation. We want to first stop the passage of smoke, and then obviously stop the passage of flame. So again, we're slowing down the spread of fire, maintaining the hourly rating of that substrate that's been derated. Okay. So probably if you could get anything out of this, 30, 45 minute conversation here is understand that, there's a variety of manufacturers out there, all provide excellent materials, products, but the most important aspect of a proper fire stopping, or to absolutely, maintain the integrity of that substrate that's been derated, is to install that product per a system. So, when there's typical training that's being asked out on a job site, or with the subcontractor, or if you're asked to be trained or certified, it's mainly understanding that the products that are available to you are installed per a tested and listed assembly. Okay, we'll get into what some of those systems are and give you some examples, but these are all per code. Okay, so fire protection is all required per code. We're not doing it for we are doing it for our health, but it's all per the local jurisdictions and or industry code requirements. So fire stop is required once you've penetrated a substrate. It's a code requirement. Who are the responsible parties? Typically, especially, just keeping it high level with what we're talking about here today for through penetrations, construction joints, and protective wraps, UL and Intertech. Okay, so when I say, we want to make sure our products are installed per a tested assembly, typically that's going to default back to a UL listing or an Intertech listing, especially here in the US. So they've developed criterias for what a fire stop needs to pass these test standards, and probably the most prevalent standard that you're going to be asked to meet out on projects is E814. Okay, so again, we want to make sure that the product that you've chosen, right, not just because on the packaging it says it's 1 hour or 4 hour rated, we want to make sure that product is installed per a third party listed and tested assembly. And again, that's going to be defaulting to typically a UL or Intertech tested assembly. What if you can't find an existing UL assembly or Intertech design? That's when you get with your manufacturer. With the manufacturer of the product that you're installing, you want to make sure that that you're not just guessing, or saying, well, I typically only have to install a 1/2 inch depth of this material. If I install 2 inch depth of it, it should be acceptable. That's not what you want to do. You want to make sure that you've consulted, with a manufacturer that has test data, that can do some internal testing, that has references, that has, the history to support your installation. Excuse me, to support your installation. So don't guess at what you're doing. Consult the manufacturer of the material that you're installing. Make sure that, first and foremost, you're installing per tested and listed assembly. If for whatever reason, maybe it's a retrofit type situation that's not very common, and there are no systems that exist, get with the manufacturer, and they'll work through an engineering judgment process and provide you documentation that you can then seek approval out on the job site. So who's responsible? It's not just you, the installer, or you, the supplier. We all take a helping hand. We're all responsible for making sure that fire stopping is enforced. is installed properly. So nowadays on site, it's one big effort. So it starts obviously with the owner on down to the GCs. Specifiers are heavily involved. Code officials, manufacturers, DI yourselves, as helping your contractor partners, making sure they're getting the resources that they need to provide the appropriate solution. So it's a life safety installation or trade that we want to make sure is done correctly. There's a lot of eyeballs on it. So again, that's where these systems come in place. So to break it down today, as I mentioned, we're talking, through penetrations. Typically when you think firestop, that's probably the most common. Especially touching all trades, right? Mechanical, electrical, plumbers, right? We're all punching through, making openings in rated substrates and having to repair those substrates. But we also want to touch on constructive joints and protective wraps. Okay, so protective wraps are insulative solutions, and then joints, construction joints are solutions for where one rated substrate ties to another rated substrate. Again, as I mentioned, systems. When you add up all the different trades out on the projects, on the project, and all the different penetrations, openings, joints, that you see going out on site, you want to make sure that you're referencing the appropriate system. Most of your top manufacturers have more than enough systems to meet the needs out on site. There's literally thousands of different tested and listed assemblies out there for reference. So again, don't guess at how to install the product. Make sure it's being installed per a tested system. So criterias, if you're being asked to install, or provide a fire rated solution, or if a contractor's coming to you, the distributor, asking for the appropriate product, it's not just, give me something red or give me something that's 2-hour rated, right? We want to know exactly what the scenario consists of. So some questions or some things that you need to make sure that you understand is you want to know what the hourly rating is of the substrate, right? You want to know the substrate construction type. Is it a gypsum wall? Is it a concrete slab? How thick is that concrete? How is that gypsum wall framed? Is it wood framed, metal framed? If it's a deck and we're talking firestop joints, we want to make sure that we understand what the deck type is, the thickness of the concrete, is it a fluted deck, is it a floor ceiling assembly? We need to understand if it's a pipe penetrating a wall, what kind of pipe is it? Is it metal? Is it plastic? Obviously, they're going to burn differently. What kind of plastic is it? PVC burns differently than ABS or CPVC. So, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked, that need to be gathered, then go choose the appropriate UL or Intertech listing. Insulated pipes, insulated ducts. We need to know what type of insulation are on the pipe or are on the duct, the thickness of that insulation. The systems will then identify, how to fire stop, and whether or not a packing material or backing material is required, like a mineral wool. Some systems may require mineral wool, some systems may not. Okay, you can save quite a bit of money if you know what the system entails. Sometimes we're installing twice as much firestop product than we need. If you're following the appropriate system, you might be able to install a 1/2 inch where you've always installed a 3/4 inch depth of material. So again, we want to understand exactly what the conditions are. Then we can choose the appropriate listed and tested assembly for you. At the very bottom there, we've identified some criterias that are also important. Do you need an acoustical rating? Do you need a W rating, which we call it, which is watertight? L rating, that's basically leakage, air leakage, so your smoke seal. Now there's an M rating that's starting to be enforced, which is gets down to the movement criteria. So again, we want to understand all the different conditions, all the different scenarios, and substrate and penetration types, joint width and things like that before we can determine the appropriate product and the appropriate UL listing. Annular space is probably for those of you that maybe have had some headaches out on projects. Possibly you're a contractor and the drywall you're the electrician or the plumber, and the drywall contractors left some larger openings around your penetrance, or maybe too small of openings. This is where coordination and getting with the contractors ahead of time and kind of scheduling, identifying what the system details require. But the smaller annular space isn't always the best, and the UL system will identify a minimum and maximum annular space. So sometimes we need that annular space around your penetrating item, depending on the type of penetrant, so that we're able to get enough of that material, whether it be a sealant or a wrap strip, caulking, whatever it may be, in and around that opening, so that we can close off that opening appropriately. So we'll get into some of the technologies and things of firestop materials, but knowing your annular space is important. Also, inspectors, third-party, code officials and consultants. Annular space is a big thing for them. They don't want that annular. They want that annular space to be within spec, right? To be per the system. And not larger and also not smaller. So know your annular space. Some key terms, we've touched on a few of them, but these are the primary terms when referencing. Also the appropriate system. F rating, that's your hourly rating. Okay, the system will identify the capabilities, the F rating capabilities. So, typically most construction types are within 1 to 4 hours. So the system that you're referencing is going to identify that maximum hourly rating, that F rating. So if you have a situation on a job, maybe your walls are only 1 hour rated, but you're referencing a 4-hour system, just because the system says it's rated up to 4 hours doesn't necessarily mean, that your 1 hour installation, can still be achieved. So you want to make sure the system exactly matches that hourly F rating. So F rating, T rating, just think of that as like the transfer of heat, right, from one side of a substrate to another. Typically, T ratings are enforced, in joints at the top of wall, also around exposed pipes. That are metallic. We want to make sure that we slow down that heat transfer, right? That metal is a conductor, and if that metal pipe is exposed, right, it's outside of a wall cavity, we want to make sure that we're providing the appropriate T rating. Typically, that's going to be, an added insulative type material, to that pipe. But T ratings and F ratings and L ratings, which L rating is your air leakage, right, your smoke seal. Those three are the most heavily enforced, especially the F rating, but those three are kind of the most heavily enforced criterias out on your projects. Then with W rating, unfortunately, I missed it on this slide, but then in addition to that would be your W rating and your M ratings. The W rating is the water resistance or watertight seal in addition to your F, T, and L. So depending on where you're at in the country or maybe the type of project, more and more contractors, owners are wanting their firestop assemblies not only to be F rated, right, or to provide a firestop, but also to provide a watertight solution. So, maybe it's to help during the progression of the job site, right? If there's weather storms that come through before the exterior or the roofs on the building. They don't want weather to hit the firestop products and wash out the firestop products, or maybe they don't want the weather to the rain to get through through the firestop materials down into a finished area of the building during construction. Or maybe it's just, like I said, the owner wants it because maybe the only separation from one high-end unit to another high-end unit to stop flooding are the firestop materials. So again, some key terms or criteria when referencing firestop systems are your F rating, your T rating, your L rating, your W rating. And again, not just the product is going to be able to provide you these ratings, but the system. The system's going to detail if these ratings are achieved. And then again, as I mentioned, if you do not have a system that you can install to, then get with the manufacturer of the material that you're using and get an engineering judgment for your exact condition that you have out on site. So here's some key technologies in our industry. I've mentioned the wraps, the insulative wraps. Give you some visuals on our insulative materials, but there's wraps and there's mats in the industry. The insulative wraps are basically, they can do things. They can either help, they can slow down the transfer of heat. They can also contain heat, contain the fire. Providing, maybe you have a scenario where you need, 0 inch or zero clearance to combustibles. That's where your insulative solutions would come in place. There's also mats in the industry that can be used, around circuitry or around piping, depending on the type of solution, that basically absorb heat and they release a chemically bound water. So it's basically a form of sweating to cool down its surroundings and provide protection. For fire stopping specifically, when you're thinking materials or caulkings or sealants, quite often you're going to think or be asked or need a product what we call intumescent, and that's basically a product that expands with heat. So what I'm showing here is a sheet good that you can see, the different stages of expansion. There are materials out there that expand, don't need a tremendous amount of expansion. And then there's solutions out there that do need a tremendous amount of expansion. And again, that's where the system comes in play, because it'll tell you how much of that certain product you need to expand and cool, to expand and provide that solution. So intumescent's a big one to know. Ablative, a lot of our solutions out there don't need to be intumescent, right? So we don't necessarily need a product that's going to expand and shut down that opening, but we need a product that's going to have great adhesion to the substrates, to the items, to the penetrants possibly, and then that's going to be able to absorb heat and just provide a barrier. So there are products that are non-intumescent. A lot of the materials that you see in joints, right? Endothermics, silicones, acrylics. A lot of those products, they're not intumescent. They don't expand, but they char and they perform a strong bond. So ablative, intumescent, insulative, and endothermic are kind of the four main technologies. Again, primary areas of containment: through penetrations, protective wraps, construction joints. Let's touch a little bit on through penetrations. I have a real quick video here, and I'll narrate it. I'll narrate it for you because I'm not sure if the sound is working. But it's a very simple, video, just kind of showing you the basics of firestop. Here we have a simple wall right, with a variety of different types of penetrations. Plastic pipe with a collar, little cable tray with some pillows, insulated pipe, blank opening, bundle of cables. This gives you an idea. If you haven't, been to a manufacturer's test facility, if you ever get the chance, I definitely recommend it. Get with your DI account manager, your DI branch, and if you have the interest, get that arranged. But this just kind of shows you what what an hourly rated wall is exposed to. So here it's hooked up essentially to a furnace. It's exposed to 1700 degrees. Okay, so that's not just the penetrating items, but the wall, the gypsum, the framing. I believe in this situation, this is a wood framed wall, but you can see, the gypsum did its job, right? There wasn't it held up. What's happening here now is it's exposed to a host stream test, 30 psi, minimum 20 feet, and they hit the exposed surface, and essentially that pressure that the non-fire side is exposed to, if our firestop products withstand that pressure, we've essentially passed the test. So it's these openings, even as small as a little cable, a little pipe, if you don't properly fire stop those small openings, obviously that hose stream is going to blow out the firestop product. So not only does it have to withstand the high temperatures, but we have to withstand that high pressure as well. So if you haven't installed that product correctly to withstand that pressure, you're going to have a failure. I'm sorry, won't advance here. Sorry, my screen won't advance. So again, I just wanted to show kind of the importance, no matter how small or how large that opening is, we want to make sure that the product's installed properly and that the appropriate products have been used. If you use the incorrect product, maybe the color was right, but the product is wrong, and we didn't have good adhesion, you're going to have a failure. So we want to make sure that if the system identifies a certain amount of compression of mineral wool, certain amount of compression of those pillows, certain depth of putty, if it's a device, like a pass-through type device, that requires, it to be installed in a certain manner, we want to make sure that we follow those UL systems to a T. Otherwise, just something as simple as that hose stream hitting the materials is going to cause a failure. So flexible wraps. So when are flexible wraps used? Typically in our industry here, from an insulation supplier's perspective, especially these flexible insulative wraps and mats are used to as shaft alternatives. They're used to maintain a fire within a duct or keep it from entering a duct. It's used in plenum rated areas, right? Let's say you have a non-plenum rated cable or a non-plenum rated pipe in a plenum area. One of the simplest ways to provide plenum protection to that item is to encapsulate it, and that's with a plenum wrap type material. Also these flexible wraps are used to help provide T ratings in fire stop scenarios. Okay, so again, when you have that exposed metal pipe, that's going to transfer heat rapidly and potentially start a fire in a non-fire area, or in an area where there's no fire. We want to insulate that metallic item to slow down that transfer of heat. So here's again, some common installations and that you see often in our industry: duct wraps, right? Ventilation, duct protection, chemical exhaust, grease duct, In the middle there, dryer ventilation wrap. That's a code that many jurisdictions around the country are adopting. They want the dryer ventilation ducts to be protected, right? So if that cotton ignites within that dryer ventilation duct, that it's contained, and that we can carry that fire to the outside of the building. And then the endothermic mat is used for a variety of different applications, but critical circuitry for the most part. So duct wraps, dryer wraps, and endothermics mats. As I mentioned, shaft alternative type materials. The spaces are getting tighter and tighter, as we evolve in construction, making it very difficult to hang drywall shafts or, alternate solutions. So, grease ducts in kitchens, ventilation ducts into stairwells, life safety ducts, and also chemical exhaust ducts, let's say in a lab. Again, shaft alternative solutions, obviously there's code requirements that must be met, that determine the installation of that of the insulative solution. But again, very, very cost effective alternative to drywall shaft. And again, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, the enforcement, might not necessarily be identifying, a certain standard or scope today, but it's definitely growing. So be aware, for those of you that are contractors calling in, and if you're in multifamily, especially type projects, there could be a new standard that wasn't in place last time you did that type of project, but might be in place today, that's requiring protection of the dryer vent. So again, the mat solutions, a ton of different types of solutions with endothermic mats, everything from, in our industry, typically we're protecting, critical circuitry, but there's many other solutions with for endothermic mats. Structural steel protection, pipelines, vessel skirts, things of that nature, electrical panel boxes, storage tanks. Okay, let's touch a little bit on joints as we start to wrap things up. Why the need for fire-resistant joints? If you think about it, and I still see it today. You go out on a job, and the inspectors enforcing all the penetrations that are going through the wall to be fire stopped, which is great, which is excellent. However, there's an inappropriate fire stop solution at the top of wall, or maybe no solution at the top of wall. So essentially, even though we spent the time and the money and the effort to fire stop the through penetrations, we still have, a major gap at the top of the wall for smoke and flame. So all the rated joints on the project need to be fire stopped as well. Joints move, okay? And so because of movement within joints, there are static joints out there, but most often these joints are going to move. So it's very important that you choose the appropriate product and obviously reference the appropriate tested system. There's many different types of joints that you'll be exposed to out on a project. Head of wall, wall to wall, floor to floor, wall to wall, different substrate types, right? Fluted deck, flat deck, gypsum to gypsum, concrete to concrete, CMU to concrete. So again, depending on the type of substrate that you have, it's not necessarily a one product does all. We need to make sure that the appropriate product has been chosen and installed per the appropriate tested and listed system. Okay, so as similarly to our penetrations, joints have to provide an F rating, right? You know, if that wall and that deck is 2-hour rated, you know, the joint between the two that ties the two together needs to be 2-hour rated. You know, we need a T rating, you know, to stop and slow down the transfer of heat. It needs to be installed in a manner that's going to, you know, pass that hose stream test that you saw. It could be a slab edge, you know, curtain wall, you know, type of joint, you know, that's you know, running horizontally, and we need to, and it's going to have weather, you know, on it for a period of time. We need it to be watertight, you know, rain resistant. You know, it might need to have a specific amount of movement, you know, depending on the design of the building, or if we're in a seismic, you know, region, that joint's going to need to move and move often. And so again, you know, this is where, you know, it's not just the product, it's the system. Okay. And many joint systems are very specific on the installation of mineral wool. So even though you know, the manufacturer is, you know, provided you know, a product, you know, that's, you know, potentially capable of providing the hourly rating, just the product alone might not be able to provide the hourly rating, and it's going to need a backing material as well, like mineral wool, and that mineral wool is going to have to be installed in a certain manner. Quickly, just wanted to touch on systems. We don't have a ton of time. However, you know, wanted to give you a quick look at a typical, very common UL listing. Okay, as I've mentioned, you know, there's thousands of different listed assemblies, especially when you combine all manufacturers. There's thousands of different options out there, and many are more cost effective than the other. But basically, to break it down, a system provided by a third party, right? So it's not a manufacturer's test or approval. It's provided by a third party, UL or Initech. It's going to provide you, you know, a detailed drawing that's going to identify the floor, you know, the substrates that are involved, right? The floor or the wall. It's going to identify the type of substrates. Okay, is it wood framed? Is it concrete? You know, how thick is the concrete? You know, is it steel framed, wood framed? You know, the layers of drywall, how thick the drywall needs to be. So it's going to identify the substrate types. It's going to also identify whether or not that opening is allowed to be sleeved or not. In many cases, it's optional. But if your opening is sleeved, you want to make sure that you're referencing a sleeve that specifically calls out it, or a UL system that specifically calls out a sleeve. It's going to identify the penetration types that are allowed and tested to. In this scenario, this is a concrete substrate with metallic penetrance. Okay, so it identifies the different types of metallic and the diameter of those metallic pipes that have been tested. So in this case, I know it's probably hard for some of you to see, but in this case, it goes up to a maximum of a 30-inch steel pipe, maximum of a 6-inch copper pipe, you know, iron conduit up to 6-inch conduit. So it's a pretty well-versed assembly, you know, from a substrate, concrete substrate and metallic penetrant scenario. But then it gets into the installation of the firestop. So this specific assembly identifies, you know, an optional backer material like a backer rod or a mineral wool packed into the opening, and then it specifically calls out the firestop product, and how that firestop material should be installed, right? So depending on the hourly rating and the substrate that you have, it gives a graph of, you know, a chart here, you know, depending on the thickness of the concrete, the diameter of that pipe, the minimum and maximum annular space, it'll then identify how that sealant should be installed, that caulking should be installed, and at what thickness. At the very bottom of a tested assembly, it's going to then identify the products that were tested. So in this case, very common intumescent materials, one being acrylic, one being a silicone base. So again, just we don't have a lot of time, so this is just an overview of a very common, very typical UL assembly. But again, you need to know the substrate types, the hourly rating requirements, the penetrant type, the angular space, and then you can determine what product it is that you're being, that you're installing. Maybe you have to work backwards. Maybe you're out on a site and you only have, one type of product. So then you got to work backwards. All right, is this product capable of achieving this? Get with your DI counterpart, and the manufacturer, and they'll help you find a solution for that product if it's available, if it exists. I'm going to jump through some of this just due to time. Okay, so there's, again, a fire stop, again, it comes down to systems, but many people think that fire stop is a caulking or a sealant or a putty. That's not the case. If you're a mechanical contractor, depending on the solution that you're trying to achieve, or the scenario that you have out on site, there's going to be a wide variety of products that you're going to need to educate yourself on, especially if you're wanting to install the most cost-effective solution. Same thing with electricians, right? It's not just a putty, not just a caulk. There are pillows out there. There's blocks. There's planks. There's putty. There's wraps. There's devices for through penetrations, and cable management. There's foams. Same thing with the plumbers. Plumbers, you get into collars. If you're doing a cast-in-place type solution, there's cast-in devices. There's wrap strips that slide into the opening. So again, not just caulk-only solutions nowadays, especially if the enforcement out on the site knows what they're looking for. Drywall joints, drywall contractors. Again, joints are made to move. So quite often these are going to be different products than you're using for through penetrations. We're going to get more into the acrylics, more into the silicones, more into sprays. There's also tapes for construction joints nowadays. So again, the UL system, will identify, the movement requirements, and the type of materials that are going to be needed to be installed to achieve those specifications around movement. And that's about it, Jared, on my end. I might have went through it fairly quickly, and obviously it was just, as I mentioned, just kind of a fire stop 101. Obviously, DI and ourselves are more than willing to take your education to another level. So if you want to get that organized, please reach out to your DI account manager and or branch, and we'll take your education to another level. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate that. A great overview of the fire barrier portfolio from 3M. So while we're waiting on some questions to come in, I do just want to take a second to tell everyone about our somewhat new digital customer platform. Last year, we completely overhauled our website at distributioninternational.com. We added a wide range of value-added features, including our customer portal called Customer Connect. When you are logged in as a DI customer, you can view past invoices, access pricing, request quotes, and even submit orders all online. Maybe the best feature is a detailed online product catalog of more than 29,000 products. It's easy to search and easy to navigate. Go to distributioninternational.com today and register for your online account to make your job easier. Just a reminder on submitting questions, click on the questions tab in the GoToWebinar control panel. You can submit your questions there and we will read them off. First question we have is from Mike. It says, when is dryer warp required?
Oh, the dryer wrap. So
Yep.
yeah, the dryer wrap is a growing, it's becoming more and more enforced, than it has in the past. There is an ASTM standard that is being specified. It's the 0218 standard for protection of the dryer wrap, or I'm sorry, of the dryer exhaust system. And typically you're going to see that in multifamily construction, where you have a dryer, a washer dryer type scenario, and then that exhaust system might trunk into another exhaust system in the facility, or maybe go across multiple units. So in the past they've been able to kind of put that exhaust system up into the floor ceiling assembly, unprotected, maybe just sheetrock, an hourly 5/8 inch of sheetrock on the ceiling. But over time there's been fire situations within the duct that started in one unit and then ended up breaking out in another unit because the fire got into the dryer duct. So it's really not countrywide at this point, at least what we're seeing. I definitely, if you're a contractor and you're bidding work, and maybe and even if it's a jurisdiction that you're very familiar with, I would educate yourself to maybe any local code adoptions or standards maybe that they've taken on, because I have seen it pop up in jurisdictions today when it wasn't, let's say, necessarily there yesterday.
Thanks, Jason. So far, that's the only question that has come through. I do want to kind of echo your reminder to everybody about the current promotion. You still have a couple more weeks, I guess, well, less than that, I guess, to jump in on that. That's a great promotion with some really high-end rewards. So I encourage our customers, our DI customers that are on this webinar, to try to take advantage of that. And I know we have a lot of DI people on the call, so be sure that you're telling your customers about it. So I don't have any more questions, Jason. So I think we can wrap this up. I want to thank you for your time, and just remind everybody to find out about future webinars that we schedule. Just be sure to follow us on LinkedIn. We post everything there, and you have you see Jason and Mario's contact information with 3M. They're on the screen now. So if you have any more questions about these fire bearing materials, reach out to your DI rep. And if you have any technical questions, you can reach out to these guys at 3M. Jason, Mario, and Samantha, everybody at 3M, thank you guys so much. And thanks to everybody who joined the call today. Appreciate it. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week.